I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Roxy,
Sean?
I'm stepping it up because we needed comfort at the shock of what this was, but now I'm stepping it up to go to the suit jacket because I feel like we're in it and it's now going to become the new business as normal for a while.
Sean, you know that for the first time in a long time, the bigger deal than your outfit is your background. You know that you've been cheating the system. We're all aware of what you're trying to do. Anybody who's watched the show before, it's very clear the maneuver you're trying to pull right now. So you can distract us with your suit jacket,
right?
But we all know your game.
Could you imagine if I wore the blue jacket with the blue background? That would have been really rude. But see, I can't fill your black hole of emotional needs because I have beautiful blue eyes. And this will be a struggle that's actually yours, not mine.
Ooh, it's a me problem. How millennial of you, in fact. Okay. All right.
I'm just saying. Guys, we're also excited because part 2 of Brandon Trost, DP director, and last week we covered DP, and this week director. So we're very excited to have you back. Thanks, Brandon, for being here. And is he frozen? Did he hear me?
Oh, he was so clear the entire time, and then we lost him.
Yeah, no, wait, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Now we're good.
Oh wait,
now
I'm back.
Yes, you're there and alive.
Something strange. Hi.
It was a little April Fool's joke he was playing on us, but now he's back. Sure,
it worked.
Hi, hello.
Welcome back, and as always, we have Miss Phenomenal Roxy Striar, my co-host.
That is me. What? Never has it felt so good to be called Miss Phenomenal as during this time of quarantine where I am by myself and nobody calls me any names at all. So I will take that as the highlight of my day so far. Thank you, Sean Whalen. Yes.
Run with that.
Well, I can't run very far with that, but maybe up and down the street, just nowhere public.
So this week, we're going to be discussing Brandon's transition from DP into directing, how that happened, curiosity of how it goes, how does one train for that or see it when you're a DP? And then this week, I guess we could talk about the project that you directed me in, because isn't last week we did the FP, if I'm not correct?
We talked about that. Oh, yeah.
But now we'll talk about this one that you directed me in a larger scale. But before we do that, we got to do the Sean's week, and I think it's Roxy. The Sean's week this week is going to be, the theme is the new normal. So whatever that means to you in your voice, the new normal. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Sean's week. Wow, we had the same vibe.
Yeah.
The exact same vibe. It was kind of not super excited.
No,
but we weren't just depressed.
This is what it is.
This is it.
This is what it is.
I got all of that. Now, Brandon, as an art director, I hope you got all the subtleties in that.
Oh, I picked up on it. Yeah, it was. It was definitely there.
It was all there. What I just
Sean,
said.
I'm pretty sure we both just booked the part for sure.
Yeah, I think we booked it, or at least we got a call back.
Yeah, for 100%.
100%. We're pinned. So this week, a lot more TikTok stuff. Having really fun with that. I had my second QuaranCon, where I set up my living room as a convention almost. I'm selling all my pictures half off. But what's really weird is I do these lives when I do this, and I'm reading people's names and I'm saying, "How are you? Where are you from?" and stuff. And all these people are flipping out. And I was like, "What are you flipping out about?" They go, "No one talks to us when you do a live." And I go, "I don't know what that means." So I went to a bunch of other lives people, and they're just doing stuff around their house. They're not looking at the people's names. They're not interacting with them. And I thought, how weird. Like, why would you want to do a live if you're not going to chat with people? So they very much appreciated that. I also talked to Brandon's brother, Jason, in Australia, and he's working on a independent movie, kind of a redo of this movie that he'd done before, Wet and Reckless, as his character. And he's going to have me reprise a role over Zoom or whatever. So that was really cool. You guys remember as of Jason and Tilley. I've got a self-tape this afternoon that I'm doing after this for a TV show. And the fun news is really, I got a new student from this show. She's from San Francisco.
Tell us more.
She has been listening to this show for since we've been on. She's listened to Devoured Every One. She has made her 2-year plan. She's moving out. She was going to move down in May, but obviously that got put on hold. She told me her background, and we start our first in-person class over Zoom tomorrow.
That's awesome.
Isn't that
Sean,
cool? And
audition period right now. Are you doing a lot of self-tapes, or has it been kind of dead?
No. There's I coached one woman, Suba. You remember Suba when she came out? Coached her on something late last week, and I'm doing. This is the first one I've gotten since the quarantine started. So that's kind of what I've been doing, and so that's kind of slowly ramping up and trying to build my social media presence and having fun shooting and editing stuff and. Editing a short film that we did right before the quarantine came, and actually hooking up with family on Zoom. We never did it before, but we've gotten together twice and had like the funnest. We played a game night one night. We just hung out and drank one night. I mean, it's crazy. It's so weird. We're like, why does it take a pandemic for us to hang out?
Everyone's craving that social interaction.
It is. I think that's it too. And so that's kind of what I've been up to. And we thank you guys all for being here. And we want to keep you involved and coming back. So Roxy.
Sean. All right, fine. Good enough of a transition, I guess. You guys are seriously amazing at home. And like Sean was talking about with his family during this time, wanting to connect and be with people and interact with the people you care about most. We care so much about you guys, and we're so lucky that you care about us as well. So if you are watching us during this time, make sure you give us 5 stars, a thumbs up wherever you are, if that's on Apple Podcast or if it's here on YouTube. Then just tell us how you're feeling. Leave a comment. We read them out loud every show. We actually have some people in the live chat right now. So we go live every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Pacific time on AfterBuzz's channel on YouTube. And that's the best way to be in the show live. So shout out to Larry Lease, who just said that he loves AfterBuzz TV. Brandon, love your cinematography work. As always, everyone hit that like. Shout out to you, Larry, for pimping out our stream and telling people to hit the like button. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Very nice.
And also Weston Ira is in here right now. He wants to know what about having video game actors on to talk about that. So that's definitely a suggestion that we could look into for a future episode. I actually know somebody who would be perfect for that. So I'll be talking to you, Sean.
Let's put that in there.
Thank you to everybody who watches after the fact, listens after the fact. Subscribe, like, write a comment. We read everything, and we'll give some more shout outs next week.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So if you have not listened to part 1 of Brandon Trost's interview with us, go back, listen to that. We talked a lot about his DP work, how he got into it. Just recapping quickly how he met me. We met through his family. His brother and sister were working on a movie back east. Then the 3 of them are working on a movie together, and that's when I met Brandon, called The FP. I highly recommend it. So fun. And then we became friends after that. And Brandon also, recapping, said that his family was always doing work in the film industry, and he thought he was going to go into special effects like his father, but his dad said, why don't you try DP'ing? And he enjoyed it and he liked it. And we talked about all that. So go back and listen to that. He's got really great tips for actors and things for us to learn and really grow from with that information. But now we're transitioning to, Brandon getting into directing. So when I met you, technically, Brandon, you were kind of co-directing the FP anyway, right? I mean,
I was, yeah. I mean, Jason and I were directing it together, but I was shooting it also. So And that was something that Jason and I were leaning into for a while. That
Right.
wasn't the only thing we had done. We had done like some shorts and some sort of like fake movie trailers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
For a moment we were, kind of trying to brand ourselves as like a brother directing team.
Right.
And right at the time we were making the FP is also right around the time my DP career was sort of taking off, in the
Yeah.
studio world. So it was, I kept
That
getting
was
bigger.
Crank too, right? Wasn't that around Crank too?
Crank 2 was my first studio movie, and then the
Yeah.
FP Jason and I made directly afterwards. So it was like,
Okay.
so right after I made Crank 2, that kind of opened the door into the studio world for shooting. And
Right.
we made the FP in between that. I mean, the FP ultimately took us 5 years to get finished because it was such a small
Yeah.
movie. Like that was how long it took to get it just to be done and post and favors and everything that we were calling to have it made. But at any rate, it was one of my favorite experiences making the FP and all that. But also at the
Yeah.
same time, it was like I had to work, and I had
Right.
I had to I had to pay bills. I was taking,
Oh, we got a little
and
frozen.
so
Oh, edge of my seat. He was taking what? What was he
Hey,
taking?
what was he
hoping
taking?
for. Oh wait,
Brandon, rewind for us.
Did
You
I
said,
freeze?
I was taking, and then we paused.
I was taking. Well, I mean, I was just saying that I was just taking these jobs because
Right.
one, it was what I wanted as a DP. I mean, I went to school to be a cinematographer. I
Right.
didn't necessarily go into it with directing in mind. I always wanted to make films. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I knew that no matter what. But I think even as a kid, I was like in film school thinking, man, like directing's great, but like there's so much responsibility, and there's so much just focus on one thing for such a long time. Whereas if I'm a DP, it's like I can shoot a movie in a couple months, 3 months, 4 months. Like I can kind of get in and out of something, and then off onto something else completely different. And so it's always a palate cleanser. And when you're
With
directing
that
something,
said, Brandon,
feature-wise,
can I stop you for a second? Which something
sure.
I don't know. What do DPs have any say in post? Like, do you have
Oh
any
yeah.
editing
Well,
notes or
not
things to say?
well, not unless you're invited to give them.
And that's
if
pretty
you're close,
rare,
if
right?
you're I mean, it depends, like, I know for a fact, like talking to like Seth Rogen at one point after we had made The Disaster Artist, we were just hanging out afterwards after the premiere. He's like, "You gave us one of our best notes." And I was like, "What was that?" And he said, I shot so much of that movie to be done in like one take. Like almost every scene in that movie we shot with the idea you could just use the master as the one shot for the whole scene. And I think that after I had seen a test screening of it, I said, "Hey, this is great, but I think there's a lot of shots where you really could just hold on some of these scenes and let them play out and get a little more of that sort of like documentarian immediacy out of it." And I guess they
Yeah.
dug in and found some shots that they could just hold on to. And a handful
Yeah.
of scenes were tweaked that way. I mean, I don't know how how true that was ultimately and what they chose, but
Right.
that's what he told me. But that's an example of like having a little bit of influence. I mean, I always have, as a DP, creative control over color. When you come after the movie's been cut together, you go back and do color correction, and it's basically like just matching everything and making sure all the scenes cut together well. You can change. You basically can. It's like Photoshop, but for a movie, for every single shot.
Right,
film.
right.
So you kind of go through it. It takes a long time, and that's part of the
Yeah.
job.
And you're doing that with the editor. You're going through it with the editor.
The not as the DP
No, that's
typically.
done.
Usually
Yeah.
is the DP. The movie will have been edited at that point. The
And
editor
then
may
you're
come
going,
by and like have some notes, or want to make sure that it's all kind of going according to plan, and they want to make sure I'm not like reframing shots or
yeah,
zooming in
okay.
digitally and changing stuff that they think is going to sort of ruin the narrative flow of the film. But I'm usually if I'm making those kind of adjustments, for me it's just to tell the story better.
So what
But that's on the shooting side.
Yeah. So what point did you? So it kind of people kind of know my story if they know. Like I came out here, UCLA, got a lot of heat quickly. I got into a play, and it was just kind of too much from Maryland, and the whole thing was too much. There was too much attention. Like I was getting auditions for studio stuff, and I had just been there a couple months, and I was homesick, and I just wasn't ready. And so I took a few years off and just went to college at UCLA, and had a great time. Then I went back in the Groundlings later. Do you feel like you were saying the responsibility of directing at that time was just too much at that time? If
Well,
you
I
like,
knew
if
that
you
it
got
was.
offered a big studio movie after Crank 2 to direct, was that too soon, do you think?
I mean, I would have taken it and then just
Figured it
faked it
out.
and pretended like I knew what I was doing and just go for it
Yeah,
anyway. But I think that might also just be sort of, I guess, what I've always done to a certain degree until you sort of
right.
learn enough along the way to actually support what you're saying.
So
But
what point did you decide, you know, it was a few years, you shot a lot of stuff that you go, I'd really like to direct something.
well, I mean, it had happened with the FP, and making
Hmm.
that movie with my brother.
Yeah.
I think at that point I had shot so many independent films and worked so hard on so many different low-paying gigs. It was like, man, like let's just make this stuff ourselves and just make it for us. And that's exactly what we did with the FP.
Right.
And I guess just to follow up on the other stories, like I started getting all these other jobs that I had been building this career to do, and it just carried me into this DP focused career because I was working to work on cool stuff, meet great people, and it was just it was a good paying job. I'm like, I'm leaning into this, so I did
Yeah.
that and kind of just put the directing thing on hold. I mean, Jason and I were trying to keep things going for a while, but the truth is, I just was too focused in shooting where I could really
Yeah.
hang. I couldn't it
Yeah.
wasn't fair to him. It wasn't fair
Yeah.
to me or us. So it's like he's been doing, he's making his own films, which are great, and he's like a genre film machine,
Yeah.
and I've been shooting and shooting and shooting, and I've loved it. And it's
Yeah.
but I gotta say, like along that along the way, I've also worked with a lot of first time directors, and I don't think that is, and I don't say that as a bad thing. It's always been something
Yeah.
that I've looked forward to and leaned into. I think that like when you work with someone who's doing it for the first time, also you're getting all these great ideas and just instincts that might not be the usual thing that you're seeing with film with like more seasoned filmmakers, for example. But you are, as a DP, being leaned on a little more in terms of how's this going to cut, what's the coverage, what do we need for these scenes. Like I'll
So
definitely have.
inadvertently you're kind of learning more, right?
Yeah,
'Cause-
I mean,
yeah.
inadvertently, it's like I'm knowing that we've got this scene, but we're going to want a close up that hinges off to this, so that it buttons everything up, or it tells the
Right.
story in this way. It's like I'm not the boss of it, but I'm definitely presenting all of these options as
Right.
we're going through this stuff, because as I'm shooting something, I'm wanting to make sure it's editing in my brain, even though I'm not directing the thing, just so that I feel comfortable that we haven't left anything sort of off the table, I guess,
Right.
as we're putting it together.
What we've
Um,
seen from some people in the past is that if they go from being a DP to directing their first thing, it kind of is the launch of a directorial career, and often they don't go to DP again. When you were doing the FP, were you thinking that this was going to? Is that something you were looking into to see if you wanted to maybe direct and stop DPing, or did you always know you kind of wanted to dabble in both worlds?
well, it's funny. I'm sort of still in a similar position. The
Mhm.
I even then it was like, the FP was a wonderful experience and it was great, but it's a movie that we made for like 60 grand,
Right.
Yeah.
and like none of us got paid, and it took us 5 years. I mean, when you think about that, that's not like an easy,
Right.
fruitful thing necessarily when it comes down to just like living a life and paying bills. And
Right.
Right.
so I went into shooting because I was getting these like studio big movie opportunities, and I figured, man, it's like I'm gonna lean into this because I have this opportunity. It's like I stumble across this DP career that I'm very happy with and feel
Yeah.
fortunate to have been able to wrangle. But
So how did
it's harder
the
it's harder
recent
on the directing side
yeah, so how did
to
the
do that.
recent directing, this turn of the last couple years that fell into your lap? How did because
How did it come about? I mean,
you had DP'd for Seth Rogen and those guys for a while, right?
yeah, I mean, it really, fell in my lap is probably the best way to put it. To be honest, I mean,
Okay.
they reached out to me to direct a movie. It was this action comedy that ended up trying to go and then fell apart, and it didn't happen. And then this movie that you and I just did happen finally. But I was never promoting myself to them as like hey, when are you guys going to throw me a bone and let me direct something? They reached out to me directly and said, hey, we think you should do this, but we think you should direct it. And I was like, wow, awesome, thank you, that's cool, and yes, I'll do that. I mean, basically that's how it went down. But they're a great company, you know. I mean, it's Seth and Evan, you know, they have their company Point Grey, and they've always promoted within, you know, people that since I first started working with them, all of their assistants and people that have worked with them in like smaller tiers, they've promoted, and now like they're all producers that we're working together and we're all friends, and it's like they're very like, I don't know, they're like I feel like loyal is the wrong word, but it's like they invest in the people that they believe in, you know. And I think that that's how I got involved. So I was going to do this movie. It didn't really come together quickly. So then they got me in to direct a episode of this TV show Future Man that I shot the pilot for with Seth and Evan when they directed. So that was my first time directing anything that was like technically studio. It was an episode of TV for a Hulu show out of Sony. And that was fun, and we had a good time. And then this other movie was going to happen. We prepped it, and it collapsed and fell apart. It's a long story, but this stuff happens. And then in the ashes of that movie, basically, they said, well, we have this other script. We think you should read this and maybe do this one instead. And that became An American Pickle, which is the movie that I'm still finishing. It's almost done.
So would you recommend, you said I didn't push myself on those guys, right? Would you recommend somebody who's been DPing a while who wants to direct? What advice would you give them? I mean, you kind of were in a unique situation, a place that promotes within. Do you feel it's like out of place to kind of promote yourself that way if they've known somebody for a long time? Or, I mean, I know you.
It's hard to say.
It's not your style. I know that
it's not. That's the thing, you know. So I don't know. I mean, I think that if there's something you want, no matter what, you've got to be aggressive about it and work toward it in a way that makes sense to you. You know, that's what I wanted for DPing, and I built a career with that same sort of enthusiasm. And you know, at this point, I've been shooting for 20 years, which is nuts. But like that's the you know, all of that is experience that is pushed into this first directing experience for a feature. And even though technically it's my first like solo time directing a movie, it didn't really feel like I hadn't done it before. You know, just because I've been so involved with all of these movies from like the ground up. For me, it was just like having to shift gears into the all-encompassing. It's like, it's funny, like you think that, I mean, shooting a film is not necessarily easy. You know, it's not like it's a lot of responsibility. I mean, kind of like the whole movement and the look and the style and the feeling of the film can fall on your shoulders almost completely at times. And then there were times when I was directing where I wished for that little responsibility. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how detailed and how involved it becomes. Every single thing is a decision. Every single moment, every single prop or paint color and this and that, everything, you know, casting, of course, like it all sort of falls under your shoulders, and you're to blame if it sucks, you know, like that's the thing. Like that is a huge responsibility too. You can't let kind of crush you before you even get into it. Like, as a DP, you're like, well, the script's okay. I know I can make it look good, and if it looks good and kind of turns out well, great. But it's like, if it doesn't, I'm off to the next thing, and it doesn't matter. Did the movie look good? Check. Okay, great. Like it doesn't matter. Like I don't. If it fails, it's not like my fault. So there's that. Which is terrifying.
So when you moved into directing, what was the thing that you felt you didn't know that you were learning, or did you feel there was anything you didn't know? You know, that you went, oh, I'd never, you know, I better learn this, you know, or I didn't really.
Sure. I mean, I'd say behind the scenes is something that you don't see as much. You know, for me, like, I mean, that's the other thing too. I basically just skipped over doing like a small independent film on my own, jumping into just like a medium budget, like full studio movie to do something. So I'm in the middle of that whole machine, and that's the studio world. It's executives, it's all the stuff, and everyone has like a thought or an idea, this and that. And I have to say, like, for what it's worth, for such an oddball movie as this is, like, we had very little I don't know, kickback, and we weren't really like forced to do a lot that we didn't agree with necessarily. You know, there's a handful of things, but like for the most part, like I feel like we kind of got out of this fairly clean in terms of coming out with a movie that I'm really, really proud of and really happy
Right.
with ultimately.
Yeah.
What about
But
talking
navigating
to,
that is just weird to, just figure out. Sorry?
Right. That's new. That's a brand new thing.
I would think that something new-ish would be also talking and communicating with the actors. Was that something that was very different that you had to learn going from DPing to directing?
Yes, but also no. And I think part of that is that I've just been, in the middle of it all, on all these movies that I've done as a DP. Granted, I'm not the one who's focused on it in directing, and I've had experience with it on like the FP and stuff like that. I mean, for me, it didn't really intimidate me as much. Maybe it's just the way that I approach it too. It's like I'm not interested in manipulating an actor to get a performance that I want.
Right.
What I want is to know that I'm working with a professional who's doing this because they're good at it and know what they're doing. And I say, look, what I'm wanting to see out of this scene in this moment is this. And I let that actor interpret what that moment is to kind of give back. And I'm hoping that that's getting close to like the bullseye that I'm after. Because ultimately I feel like I'm never going to get exactly what I have in my head. And it's important to not lean into what can be just like a happy accident or a serendipitous gift. But at the same time, it's like I feel like even when it comes down to casting, it's like a lot of the people that I'm casting in these roles, I feel like sort of the people kind of encompass the character as like a personality that they have, and then it's like small moves right or left of that for the scene that I'm trying to tell and trying to
Right.
or the mood that I'm trying to get. It's like, like Sean, you, for example, I thought you were perfect as the scientist character.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
But it's also because I know you. So I have
Yeah.
that as an insight in terms of it being a perfect fit, but it really I think it like suited your sensibilities really well. Not to say that you can only do a doctor, but I just like had a gut feeling that was right. And it just was. And I think that that's kind of how I leaned into just the casting process. It's like
Well,
you
you
kind of tell
sound
when
like,
it feels right.
I mean, it's kind of like the philosophy of a Woody Allen or a Clint Eastwood or, somebody who goes, you just cast the right people.
Yeah.
Sidney Pollack, would do the same thing. The only time he said he worked really hard is when he would put like Tom Cruise in it,
Yeah.
And then he said, I have to, because there's a famous story of Gene Hackman on The Firm going like, you're not talking to me, dude. You're not even like, I've been dying to work for you for so long and we're not talking that much. Or he goes, dude, I just need to make you comfortable. And because you're fine. He goes, but I have to turn a movie star into an actor. So that's why, And
Yeah.
what was supposedly great about that, Tom Cruise was way up for it to go, no, do it, and
that's
and
awesome.
it feels like that's what you did. And that's what you did to me when I worked with you. It wasn't like you were super worried about what I was doing or anything. You just kind of knew like, but he knows me and seen my range and you've seen me do drama and everything.
Yeah.
I did drama and Rob's thing and that you just, I think that's a lot of directing too, is just casting the right people, right? And that's your philosophy.
I think it's casting the right people. I think it's also important to make people feel comfortable. I think nothing kind of, I've seen nerves ruin performances and stuff like that too. And I think it's, I try to cultivate a set that's as, I don't know, stress-free as possible. Like I want it to be sort of relaxed and easy, but like just focused on what the task is at hand, if that makes sense. It's like,
well, not to
I don't know.
catastrophize.
No one likes working in a shitty environment, and I think that trying to like make it feel like this comfortable, inclusive thing really brings out the best in everybody.
You did. I want to step back for a second because you did mention Future Man earlier, and I know that like I talked about before, there's a lot of people who watch the show that are trying to figure out which area of the arts they should go into and what best suits their personality or just the path they want to take. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between directing a pilot and directing a feature, and how you feel those played out?
Sure. Well, let's see. I didn't direct the pilot. I did an episode.
Oh, sorry,
in the
an
first season.
episode.
So no, it's okay. I shot the pilot, but the
Oh.
Oh, you DP'd.
I mean,
You DP'd the pilot.
I
Got it.
DP'd the pilot, directed an episode of TV, and I got to say,
Yeah.
like, directing an episode of TV versus feature, to me, a feature, like directing an episode of TV felt more like I was shooting a movie, weirdly, if that makes
Really?
sense. It was like so cool because so much falls on like the director like steps into a machine that already works. You know,
Right.
the writers are on board. The showrunner is really the director. Like that's the person who's really making the whole series.
I've always
Yeah.
heard, they always said like TV is the writer's medium and
Yes.
movies are the director's medium.
It's absolutely true, and I got to experience that firsthand. So I was very happy with it, and I loved the process, and I would love to do it again. But it was interesting just to kind of like, I don't know, I guess sort of box up what I'm expecting of that experience versus shooting on a movie, if that makes sense. Like I know how to like
Yeah.
how to approach that now.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's like I mean I loved it, but and you're still directing actors, you're still involved in casting and all that stuff. But it's like, you know, if there's something that is not clicking well with a showrunner, they're going to tell you, and they're going to ask, and you're going to do another take based on their note, and you're going to interpret it in the way that
Right.
you think is going to get that out of the actor. And it's like, but it was still fun and great. You know, it's faster.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of time. It's really stressful. I don't know. It was like.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it is a lot of hard work, TV, and
Mhm. Because it's such a fast moving train, right?
it really is. It's just there's no time. You don't have time for. There's no time for anything. You don't have time for editing either. I mean, it's like you get a couple days to edit something as a director, and it's like, well, I hope it's good. See you later. And then like, you know,
Yeah.
ultimately, it's going to be touched
Well,
by everybody else later anyway.
John Hamm did it behind the actor's studio, and a student said, "Can you tell us about the rehearsal process on your show?" And he's like, "What rehearsal process?" He goes, "This is a train that you're literally trying to stay on." He goes, "Most of your actor homework on television is not done on the set. You're doing a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff at home and doing that stuff, bringing it in, tweaking it, you know. But you've been on the show for a while, so you kind of know." But he goes, "There's not a rehearsal process in TV." He goes, "It's a train that's just moving, you know."
Yeah.
And you got to come in fully prepared. That's like soap operas. When I did soap operas, it was like,
Oh,
you
big
can
time.
be
It's
great
like-
on a soap opera if you want to.
You better
but
have
if you don't,
you better have an idea for, as a director, you better have an idea on a TV show for what your blocking is going to be for the scene before you walk in there too, because everyone's going to walk in and look at it. Okay, what are we doing? And you have to like at least have an idea of where everyone's going to go immediately. It's not just like rehearsing and then figuring it out with the actors and then seeing where you want to go and
Yeah.
letting it naturally kind of bring you somewhere. It's like you stand here, you go here, you do that. This happens there, and then if you watch it and everyone's cool with it, that's what you do. Like that, and you
Yeah.
just have to have
Yeah.
it mapped out so fast.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
there's not a lot of room for discovery, I guess you can say. Maybe
Yeah.
that's exactly what you were just saying. But
Well, as a director, what would you say? What advice would you give to actors starting out? You know, if you had anything to give to actors, we have a lot of actors who are starting out on this show, or trying to start out, or trying to maintain. You know, you've worked with big people on a lot of different projects. You know, what would you
You know-
say is something that you could say to them? You know, this is something that I've seen across the board that really is good, and maybe something that's not that good.
I feel like, and it's interesting because I have seen it throughout a lot of different like budget range and types of films and TV. I think staying open-minded and flexible is like something that is
Okay.
incredibly helpful. You know, it's like, while I do think that oftentimes anyone's first instinct is almost usually the right one,
Mhm.
I think it's important to fall back to, well, maybe that's also not the right thing, and I can take notes. You know, I've seen people not necessarily take a note and really go with that in a way that's like constructive. I think I've seen people take notes in a way where it's like, well, they didn't like what I'm doing, so they think I'm not doing this right. It's like, no, it's like people are watching something specific that they're trying to shift like a degree this
Right.
way or that way. You know, like it has nothing
Take
to
the
do with the
ego
fact
out of
that what
it.
you've done is right. Yeah, that's just it. It's like, you know, it's like you can work with every time I've worked with like a big actor who has that kind of philosophy, I'm always impressed. It's like, oh wow, like basically the director just said, you know, didn't say you're doing it wrong, doing it like this. Said, you know, this is great, but let's try it more this direction. It's like, oh, because we really want it to go here later. It's like, okay, that makes sense. And then they do it. It's another take, and it's like, it's all making it better because the director is the one who's got every single scene of the movie thought over and raked through and knows how one's going to connect to the next one. I think you just like, I don't know.
Don't
I would just
personalize it.
Don't personalize it and be willing to trust. I think you just have to, you have to sort of let certain things go. In terms of like I guess it is the ego, but like, it's really helpful just to be as helpful as possible.
Right.
Ultimately.
I always say your job is to make whoever's in charge, whatever their job is, easier. So if you're working for a director, make the director's job easier, not harder, easier.
And it's like, if you're not getting a note in between a take, I would just assume you're doing it right, and they're doing another take for something else that you might not be paying attention to, that's behind you, that's not working, or something like that.
Right.
Who knows?
Right.
And I think, like you were saying about not getting too much direction as well, I also don't necessarily think is a bad thing, because I think that if something's working, it's working. And
but you wouldn't be offended.
I think it can be a no news is good news sort of situation.
Yeah.
But if you wouldn't be offended if, like, say, I was working with you and you weren't saying much to me for a while, that I just went by, you getting everything you want? And you went, sure.
Oh no,
like,
that's
fine. That's totally not offensive or like too much, right? So you don't have to
Not at all.
You don't have to like cower and wonder and pace. Just go, everything good? You liking what you're seeing? Great. But it's the way you say it. That's the thing, is if you're liking it, right? I mean, you're not, that's troublesome. But if you just go, hey man, you're liking everything you're seeing? Cool.
I think as a director, encouragement, like, really just it does so much for so many people across the board, not just actors, but everyone who's involved in making the movie. And I think that it's just
focus on what's right
too. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot, I guess, in terms of just for an actor, like, there's a lot going on that is not just you and your performance, but at the same time, without the performance, we're not going to have the movie. So it's like, it's this balancing act that you have to kind of like navigate in a way.
What would you do if someone,
I don't know if that answers the question or not. But.
No, it does.
I think it does.
Really does. There's another thing is, I remember what Wes Craven did. Like, I had to do this dying scene, and so many people just don't understand our process. So I knew that I wanted to be heroic. Roach's dying scene, and he's heroic, but he's also sad and hurt, and that he's gonna die. So I was preparing, like, went in the corner and stuff, and was getting emotional into it. And Wes kind of stood, like, because there was some makeup girl who came over and goes, "Hey, Sean, are you all right?" And he goes, "He's working, he's fine." Like, you would understand an actor's process, or if they said right before a shoot, if they said, "Hey, can you give me 10 seconds?" When everything's right. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's all part of it too. It's definitely like we're there to support each other ultimately, and ultimately the director's trying to make whatever the film is the best it can be, and they can't do it alone. So it's just like trying to steer the ship toward the same point, I guess.
Well, that's funny, because that is what a TV producer said to me when I was doing a side gig. You remember my side gig? And I was like, "Oh, people are going to see me and think I'm terrible." And he goes, "Can I just tell you this?" And this is for all actors, and I might have said it on the show. He said, "There is no producer, director, or TV person that thinks about you as much as you think they think about you. They have way too much to think about. They just don't. They don't have the time to think, oh, he messed up that little line. The scene is ruined. They just don't. They go, fine. Could have been a little better, but no big deal."
It's the same. It's the same for everyone who's it works in any kind of creative process. I think it's like, oh, if I would have done this little thing, it could have been a little bit better. I mean, even as a DP, it's like there's so many scenes where I'm like, I could have spent 10 more minutes on this and it would have looked like this much better. But who notices? Nobody except for me. It's like,
right.
It's like, I don't know. I think it's important to not beat yourself up over not acquiring what you considered perfection to be, because it's just it's just I think it could just chew away at you in a way that isn't gonna like serve anything.
Well, I mean, to me, we kind of already talked about our set and how we worked. It was very chill on the movie we did. I had all my scenes with Seth Rogen. I know that, like, there was talk of a smaller caliber actor, but I was like, man, they would have freaked out if you're standing right in front of Seth Rogen. I mean, it was just me and him, like, and because I'd been seasoned and stuff like that, it was fine. You know what I mean? Like, I knew that, and I remember Brandon was like, cool, man, you knew how to, you know, it didn't throw you, it wasn't weird, and we were super chill together, you know, and
Oh yeah, I mean, you invented a whole like scientific backstory for how he got brined for 100 years, which
Right.
we ultimately didn't keep a lot of, but it's wonderful.
Well, yeah, I came. You
Um,
asked me for some notes to bring in, and I brought in like 6 pages because I go,
Yeah.
why not? You know, and Gabe brought them to you and let you choose. That's what I did for Drew Barrymore and Never Been Kissed and Wes, and you know what I mean. Like, you bring in too much, and then they go, well, no, we just need this. And you go, great, but at least I'm trying to make your job easier and much easier for you
and
to
it
pick
did.
and
It
choose
was
things.
great. And it's the other
But
thing
it's
too. It's
easier
like,
for
you
you
know,
to
I
pick
only
and
had.
choose things than have nothing. You know.
Oh, it is, and I know that there's a part we use where you are going on with what you had written yourself.
Yeah.
It's like you can't hear it because there's VO over it, but it feels great. It feels right.
Yeah, it was
It's
really
funny, like,
fun.
you know, and I was happy that we got to bring you in as well. You know, as a director too, it's like you're juggling like the budget of your movie, and it's like you can only bring in so many like
Yeah,
actors from out of town versus day players that are local, because we shot in Pittsburgh, and it's like, you know, while there were talented actors in Pittsburgh, you know, I knew that like you would be perfect for this role, so it was
right.
something that I like lobbied for hard, and
Yeah.
ultimately we got it. And the scene's the funniest scene in the movie. It is, like, that actually is the biggest laugh
Yeah.
in the movie, I think.
Woo, Sean!
Well,
It's pretty good.
well, it's the joke. It's not me.
It's the joke. It's a very good joke.
It's a very good
But-
joke. So
but
don't give me
you
all the
su-
credit.
you support it well.
Well, and I will tell you the same, Aka. Like, you kept me super relaxed. It wasn't like it would have been hard if I walked in and went, oh, who is this Brandon? I've never seen this Brandon before. I've always seen chill and relaxed. And, you know, you were the same as always. And I'd be freaked out if you were panicking and running around. And, you know, we were, me and you, the way we've always been. And so it was fine. It was just we happened to be
Yeah.
on this movie together. So, I mean,
I was definitely panicking, but I was
right,
acting
but
just like this.
you hit it from me. It's that old waiter thing. It's
Yes,
like don't
it
panic
is.
in front of the customers. Panic in the kitchen, but don't panic in front of the customers. But no, it was great. It was so relaxed. It was so fun. And listen, for all you aspiring directors or actors, you know, you'll find. I tell the story, Clint Eastwood, and then 3 months later, I worked with a brand new director who was super passionate and just in my face, but never. Tony Valenzuela, I want to give him a shout out to this movie, Velisca. He was so passionate in my face and really trying to get stuff from, and it was awesome too. Like, it was completely different. Clint was like, yeah, you're good. And I made Clint laugh behind the camera one time as an improv, and I was like, okay, now I can die happy. But he was very hands off. But the other guy was super passionate. Neither one was bad. I think it was more that, you know, one had been doing it for 60 years and one was his first feature, but they were caring and passionate and made me feel comfortable on the passionate side because he really wanted this thing to be good, and he was super psyched that he could play with me in a way. So, you know, this is what I'm saying to you actors: don't look for the good in it, see what they're trying to do. And what Brandon said today to all of us was, look at the big picture, you know, look at the big picture and know that you're part of a big picture. So don't take the ego, don't get all spazzed out and stuff like that. So great stuff, dude. Really good, really helpful, I think, for all of us to hear. Roxy, any final thoughts?
Just
You
shout
gotta wrap it
out to the people in the chat who are loving having Brandon here. Gavin said, a director that understands actors and their role in production, fantastic. Weston Ira was talking about your level of communication, which seems great. Glenn Caesar in here as well. It's an interesting conversation for people who are possibly looking at getting into the arts, or also people who just enjoy movies and television in general, to know what's going on behind the scenes. So thank you, Brandon, for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That's awesome.
And
No problem. Thank you.
where can we find you again, Brandon?
Oh, on Twitter, B_TRO. Bitro.
Right,
It's a FP
Bitro.
character. It's a reference.
It is.
Yeah.
And Miss Phenomenal.
I'm everywhere at Roxy Striar.
And I am everywhere at Sean Whalen Actor, except for TikTok. It's Sean Whalen 19. As always, thank you for letting me be part of your journey.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.